to meeting number 28 of the Standing Committee on Public Accounts. The committee is meeting in public today and is being televised. Pursuant to Standing Order 1083G, the committee is meeting today to study Report 3, Access to Safe Drinking Water in First Nations Communities, Indigenous Services Canada, of the 2021 reports 1 to 5 of the Auditor General of Canada. Today's meeting is taking place in a hybrid format pursuant to the House Order of January 25th, 2021, and therefore members may be attending in person in the room and remotely using the Zoom application. However, I do understand that everyone is attending virtually today. So for those of you that are, I will just go through a few reminders. Interpretation services are available for this meeting. You have the choice at the bottom of your screen of either Floor, English, or French. Before speaking, click on the microphone icon to activate your own mic. When you are done speaking, please put your mic on mute to minimize any interference. When speaking, please speak slowly and clearly. Unless there are exceptional circumstances, the use of headsets with a boom microphone is mandatory for everyone participating remotely. And should any technical challenges arise, please advise the chair. And please note that we may need to suspend a few minutes as we need to ensure that all members are able to participate fully. If the members agree, I'd like to take about 5 minutes at the end of the meeting for a bit of committee business. Now, I'd like to welcome our witnesses. Joining us today from the Office of the Auditor General are Karen Hogan, Auditor General of Canada, and Glenn Wheeler, Principal. From the Department of Indigenous Services, we have Christiane Fox, Deputy Minister, Joanne Wilkinson, Senior Assistant Deputy Minister, Regional Operations Sector, Chad Westmacott, Director General, Community Infrastructure Branch, and Jennifer Esdale, Director, Strategic Water Management. I will now turn it over to Ms. Hogan for 5 minutes.
Madam Chair, thank you for this opportunity to discuss our recent report on access to safe drinking water in First Nations communities. Joining me today is Glenn Wheeler, the principal who was responsible for the audit. Reliable access to safe drinking water is vital to the health and well-being of all, including the people living in the more than 600 First Nations communities across Canada. Many of these communities have lived for a long time without the assurance that their drinking water is safe. In 2015, the federal government committed to eliminating all long-term drinking water advisories on public water systems on First Nations reserves by March 31st, 2021. Overall, Indigenous Services Canada has not provided the support needed to ensure that First Nations communities have ongoing access to safe drinking water. In fact, in December 2020, the minister acknowledged that the department was not on track to meet its March 31st target. We found that since the federal government's 2015 commitment, there have been a total of 160 long-term drinking water advisories on public water systems in First Nations communities. As of November 1st, 2020, 60 remained in effect in 41 First Nations communities, with almost half of the advisories having been in place for more than a decade. In addition, we found that some long-term advisories were lifted only as a result of interim measures that did not fully address the underlying deficiencies. For some of these water systems, long-term solutions were not expected to be completed until 2025. L'équipe d'audit a aussi
The audit also found that Indigenous Services Canada's efforts have been constrained by an outdated policy and formula for funding the operation and maintenance of public water systems. The department had not amended the funding formula since it was first developed 30 years ago. Until the formula is updated, it is unclear whether recent funding increases will be sufficient to meet First Nations water infrastructure needs. The department has been working with First Nations to provide First Nations communities with drinking water protections comparable to other communities in Canada. However, we found that there is still no regulatory regime in place 15 years after we first recommended it. The federal government emphasizes the importance of reconciliation and the renewal of a nation-to-nation relationship between Canada and Indigenous communities that is based on the recognition of Indigenous rights, respect, cooperation, and partnership. Indigenous Services Canada must work in partnership with First Nations to develop and implement lasting solutions for safe drinking water in First Nations communities. This is a key component of reconciliation. Over the last few decades, many of my predecessors have raised concerns about programs that failed to effectively serve Canada's Indigenous peoples. I'm very concerned and honestly disheartened to find myself reporting a long-standing issue that is still not resolved. Access to safe drinking water is a basic human necessity. I don't believe anyone would say that this situation is in any way acceptable in Canada in 2021. We made 5 recommendations to Indigenous Services Canada, and the department has agreed with all of them. Madam Chair, this concludes my opening remarks. We would be pleased to answer any question the committee may have. Thank you. Yes, hello.
Je suis ici avec vous.
First of all, I'm here with you today on the traditional unceded territory of the Algonquin people, so thank you for inviting me to your committee. The Government of Canada has made it a top priority to ensure that all First Nations communities have access to safe, clean, and reliable drinking water. The department has welcomed the Office of the Auditor General Canada's report on the issue of safe drinking water in First Nations communities, which includes 5 recommendations, each of which aligns with action the government is taking to ensure every First Nation community has access to clean water. We are committed to our action plan, and we're committed to work in partnership with the First Nations, and we're committed to the transformation agenda. Let me begin by noting that the impact of COVID-19 in the past year cannot be understated. The pandemic has delayed the completion of infrastructure projects across the country, including projects aimed at addressing long-term drinking water advisories. The health and well-being of First Nation community members remains our top priority. The First Nations are leading the response to protect their communities from COVID-19. In some cases, this has had an effect on getting equipment and resources into communities, especially in remote and northern areas. The government has recently announced investments which are important to be able to go ahead with work. So we'll be able to dispense with the water advisories, and we'll be able to continue to support the operations and maintenance of water and wastewater systems on a permanent basis for these water systems. With the combined investments that have been made as part of Budget 219 and the $1.5 billion in additional funding announced by the Minister in December 2020, by 2025, Indigenous Services Canada will have increased the annual funding it provides First Nations to support the systems and maintenance water and wastewater systems on a permanent basis by almost 4 times. The increase in operations and maintenance funding has already started flowing directly to First Nations, with the 2020 and 2021 operations and maintenance top-ups have been provided. In addition, the budget committed $4.3 billion over 4 years to support infrastructure projects in First Nations, Inuit, and Métis Nations community, and $1.7 billion over 5 years to cover cost of operations and maintenance costs of community infrastructure.
These investments will make significant strides in closing gaps between Indigenous and non-Indigenous peoples, support healthy, safe, and prosperous Indigenous communities, and will advance meaningfully reconciliations with First Nation, Inuit, and the Métis Nation. These investments will support continued action on infrastructure and clean water. The long-term drinking water advisory commitment was made to address drinking water issues and concerns on reserves. Partnering with First Nations, the government has collectively taken a number of important actions that have improved drinking water on reserve. In November 2015, there were 105 long-term drinking water advisories on public systems on reserve across the country. Since then, 58 long-term drinking water advisories were added. And First Nations, with support from Indigenous Services Canada, have lifted 106 long-term drinking water advisories. In addition to that, 179 short-term drinking water advisories at risk of becoming long-term have been lifted, ensuring clean drinking water to First Nations. Initiatives are well underway to address the 52 remaining long-term drinking water advisories in 33 communities. Long-term solutions are underway in all cases where interim measures were put in place to provide communities with clean drinking water as soon as possible. The department also continues to support First Nations-led engagement process for the development of that long-term strategy. We will continue to work to ensure that funding is available to commit towards these important water projects and address the long-term needs of communities. In alignment with the Office of the Auditor General's recommendations, the government will continue to work with First Nations to conduct performance inspections of water systems annually and asset condition assessments every 3 years to identify deficiencies. Still, we realize more work needs to be done, and the government values input from the OIG and other observers, and we will continue to work in concert with First Nations partners to improve water infrastructure on reserve and support access to safe, clean, and reliable drinking water. In closing, we remain committed to clean drinking water because it is about building a sustainable foundation that ensures First Nations communities have that access to drinking water now and into the future. Miigwech, Namunique, merci, thank you, merci.
Thank you very much, Ms. Fox. We will now go to our rounds of questioning, starting with our 6-minute round. Mr. Weber for 6 minutes.
Madame la Présidente, point d'ordre juste avant.
A point of order, Madam Chair.
Berthold.
Oui, Madame la Présidente, c'est juste un...
Yes. This is a point that I consider important to bring up with the witnesses. I think that my colleagues will agree with me. We received the action plan from the department just 1 hour before the meeting. So we may be asking questions about things that are in the action plan, and 1 hour is not long enough for us to be able to analyze that. So this is just simply to let Indigenous Services Canada to let them know that we need some time to prepare and to be able to ask proper questions. So please do bear with us if we ask questions that are already in the action plan. It's very possible that that could happen. And Madam Clerk, maybe we could try to ask the different departments, witnesses for the next hearings, that we would be able to have a more reasonable amount of time to be able to read an action plan before the meeting. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Berthold. And I know that our clerk works diligently to get the information that we need to you in a very timely way. And I take your point as well as the chair. Mr. Weber for 6 minutes.
Well, thank you, Madam Chair. And yes, absolutely, I can concur with Mr. Berthold on that. To get the information sooner would certainly help. Thank you to Ms. Hogan and Ms. Fox for your presentation today. Ms. Fox, you talked a bit about the budget, and that was something that I sort of jumped into. I sifted through the budget, and I found that on page 265 of the budget, it says that 1.7 billion over 5 years to cover operations and maintenance costs of on-reserve community infrastructure in First Nation communities. And you mentioned it as well, a number of billions of dollars going into community infrastructure, but that could be a hockey arena, that could be anything other than a water treatment facility. You know, and then on page 245 of the budget, it had indicated that a new investment of over 18 billion over the next 5 years to improve the quality of life and create new opportunities for people living in Indigenous communities. And it also said that these investments will continue to support continued action on infrastructure. And then they mention and clean water, which is nice to see in the document. And then on page 248, it says 125 million over 4 years, beginning next year, to continue to support First Nation communities' reliable access to clean water and help ensure the safe delivery of health and social services on reserve. So all these three points that I bring up, it doesn't really specify what type of money is going directly into water and water treatment. Have you got any idea, Ms. Fox, on what type of money you're getting in this new budget that is targeted specifically for water and water treatment on Indigenous First Nation communities? Thanks.
Thank you very much for the question. So first, I will say the following. So since 2016, we have invested 4.27 billion, and that is directly to repair water and wastewater infrastructure and support the effective management and maintenance of water systems on reserve. And I would also note that in the fall economic statement, there was a commitment made that is very specific to water operation and maintenance. So in December of 2020, 1.5 billion was announced, which includes 616.3 million over 6 years with about 115 million ongoing. And that is directly for the operations and maintenance of water infrastructure in communities. So that is very dedicated to that. So we've got a series of budget announcements over sort of the last 5 years that have very specific and direct funding for water infrastructure. With respect to budget 2021, you are correct. There is 4.3 billion dedicated to infrastructure, but it's infrastructure at large and it is distinctions-based. And so we will have to work with First Nations leadership, the Inuit and the Métis Nation to have a distinction-based strategy in order to dedicate funding to infrastructure priorities. And in that, there will be water infrastructure. But I would say in terms of the very kind of specific funding that I think will have a huge impact on our ability, it's this O&M money that we've received both in budget 2019 and in budget and in the fall economic statement that really allows us to pursue the work, the important work of both kind of the critical infrastructure, but also the operation, maintenance, and the training needs of communities to be able to respond, because it's about getting the systems in, but also getting that expertise to manage the system, to monitor the system. And that can really be about job creation. It's about the transformation agenda where First Nations leadership and the community can take ownership of that water system, and we want to work very closely with them on that. So I think those are kind of now the 18 billion dedicated to Indigenous priorities that touches, you know, the next year of COVID supports that will continue. It touches health transformation, anti-racism, infrastructure, governance. It is kind of a long list, but we'll be working with our partners to really kind of work through the budget 2021 and marry it with previous investments, which, as I said, as a starting point, is over 4.2 billion for water infrastructure.
Mm-hmm. Great. And you mentioned that that is a huge amount of money, 4.2 billion. Obviously, do you think that that is a sufficient amount of money that is going to alleviate the problems that we have on these First Nation communities, reserves?
So I think that what we have seen over the last few years is a continued commitment towards addressing these water challenges. And I think that this has not just been an exercise of just lifting drinking water advisories. Obviously, that is a very focused part of our department and our mandate, but really it is about that long-term strategy. And so will more investments be required into the future? I can't say this is enough to solve everything over kind of forever, but I think that what we're seeing is dedicated funding, both in terms of the infrastructure investments and in addition to that, the operation and maintenance. And I can't stress how important that is, especially as we look at new technologies in water and how do we kind of sustain the shifts and the advancements to better have better operating systems in communities. And so we will keep working through with communities, with First Nations leaders to see what is it the solutions that work for their communities, how can we empower them and support them in making the right decisions. And then I would just note that a big part of the focus in this, sorry.
I'm sorry, we are over time. Perhaps you could make
Bye.
that observation in another answer. We will now go to Mr. Longfield for 6 minutes.
And thank you. And if Ms. Fox could complete her thought there, it's along the lines of some of the questioning I had as well.
Okay, thank you. What I was going to say is, we have a program here at Indigenous Services Canada called the Circuit Rider Training Program. And it's really about how do we actually develop the skill set within communities to develop a workforce that can do that very important operation and maintenance. And so what we try to do through that program is develop that skills and that capability and really provide the tools required for communities to manage their projects. And I think that we work with First Nations kind of leaders and communities directly, but also with other organizations and looking at how can we empower youth through skills and learning and training so they can be part of the solutions? How can we empower women so that they can be part of the solution? So I was just going to note that program with the O&M funding that we've got can really expand and build, and it's got that reliability over the long term.
Thank you. And you mentioned the women, and quite often in Indigenous communities, the women are the water watchers, the ones that take care of the water. Important to have them involved as well as the youth. I'm thinking of a roundtable I had with some Grand Chiefs in my last term at the beginning of all this. And the Grand Chiefs, I remember Chief Matabi saying to us that we need operating and maintenance. We need operating and maintenance. And there was another comment from another Grand Chief that said, we're getting these systems given to us from Ottawa, but they're not the right systems. You're not listening to our elders. You're putting septic fields where we know there's floodplains. I mean, we could tell you, if you would work with us, we could tell you better solutions and not just give us one treatment plant was actually resulting in adding contaminants to the water because it wasn't being maintained properly was one of the examples. So the whole training piece. Could you comment, Ms. Fox, on the importance of the nation-to-nation discussions and how they're actually very practical in terms of us getting to the right solutions at the right time to serve the communities in the way that they want to be served?
So thank you for that question. I think it is absolutely a foundational part of our work. It can't be about the federal government coming in and giving solutions or prescribing a particular system over another. It has to be about partnership and Indigenous leadership making decisions that are best for their communities. And so we've really tried to take a community by community approach. And that's through our action plan, we really try to have the communities, tell us what are some of the needs and what are some of their priorities. And that can't be unique to water. As you know, when we have conversations with leadership, there are other priorities that they express, but how do we empower them? And I think the decision-making is key. It's not about us to lift a long-term drinking water advisory. It's not about us to prescribe a contractor. It's not about us deciding what systems. We really want to support And that support has to come with funding. It has to come with a commitment to work in partnership. But ultimately, we want Indigenous leaders, First Nations leaders on communities to make the decisions that are best for their community. And we are there to support them in doing that.
Right, which is why our budgets are increasing as we find different needs, things that maybe we didn't consider that they're bringing forward to us. I wanted to touch on the band council resolutions. Band councils will come to us with resolutions, particularly in COVID, to say, we really don't want you in our community. We'll tell you when you can come in. And that's limited some of our construction projects and changed some of our schedules. Could you talk about the process of band councils giving us resolutions and how we're respecting those resolutions?
Absolutely, and that's an excellent question. I think that COVID-19 obviously has been our number one priority in this department over the last year. We have been working in lockstep with Indigenous leaders to partner with them, but also to support them in the very important decisions they make to protect their communities. And so band council resolutions are a way that they demonstrate to us that they've made a decision about the safety and security of their community. And that has meant sometimes a shutdown of the community. They've requested some supports at times for perimeter security to really manage the flow in and out of their communities. And at times that was it was the difference between the protection of a community, the protection of an outbreak, and a healthy community. And so we have been very responsive to band council resolutions to respect the decisions that Indigenous leaders have made. And that has meant that some of the construction season of last year was impacted. It was impacted not just because of those decisions, which were very important decisions, especially into, as we face a third wave in this country, and we have to be extremely vigilant in how we manage it, but also in terms of just getting equipment in and out. So we as a department have to think about, in a sort of summer season coming up, how do we manage both the pandemic response and the support that we're giving to communities while trying to advance some of these very important water projects and other infrastructure projects.
Okay, thanks. I have a quick one in terms of retaining the operators that we're training. Up in the Nan Nation and Sioux Lookout, they had been losing operators to the local paper mill that was paying more money. What are we doing to try operators?
Yes. So at the end of the day, for the operator salaries, like, it is definitely up to the First Nations leadership to decide on that salary structure. But what the operation and maintenance funding does is it provides more money to communities. It provides kind of 100% in terms of that formula that we have in order to fully support O&M in communities. And as such, communities are empowered to pay salaries that are greater than what they have been as a result of this funding, and then retain that talent, retain that skill, and develop it. So I think that's part of the strategy, absolutely.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much, Ms. Fox. We will now go to Mr. Blanchette-Choquin for 6 minutes.
Madame la Présidente.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'd like to say hi to the witnesses. I'm going to start with Madame Hogan. Hello, it's always a pleasure to have you with us. I'm afraid I was a little bit concerned about your report in February, and it's the same thing that I'm feeling this morning, especially with the remarks that you made before the committee at the beginning. One of the observation is that it's really awful what you've noted. I think that there is a considerable lack of work in Indigenous services. I'm going to go straight to the point here. Before looking at the details, some of your conclusions and recommendations, let's take a look at them. And what I'd like to see is you're saying that the first audit on this precise question of safe drinking water, it was in 2005. That's 15 years ago. So I think that we can say that the situation it's been ongoing for the 20 years now. So my question is, do you really feel that the department is taking seriously the role of the Auditor General? Do you think that they've really developed a cultural or an organizational culture so that, well, they say a lot and then they let the time go by, and then they're just going to wait till the next time that there's a report from the Auditor General? Well, you're quite right. We have done audits on in 2005 on safe drinking water, and there was a follow-up in 2011, and then there's the follow-up that we've just completed for the House of Commons in February. So we have seen that there has been progress, nonetheless, during that time, but the commitment to be able to get rid of all of these water advisories, it hasn't been achieved. So what we've noticed is that there are two things. First of all, there's a question of a regulation which hadn't been completed, but even more important, it was the financing formula, the funding formula that hadn't been updated for 30 years. And so that funding formula not being updated, well, it doesn't respond to the immediate needs. And we've also noted that it hasn't been adjusted for taking into consideration any kind of technological improvement and the direct impact on the ability to really have operators for the water systems. So even if there has been progress not to update a funding formula of over 30 years, I don't think that's a good approach to be able to ensure that the costs for operating and maintaining the systems would work. Well, thank you for your answer, Madame Hogan. And I think maybe you haven't expressed it exactly as I have, but so we've noted the same thing. So I'd like to restate there was an audit in 2005, another one in 2011, and your report this year, you came to note that there has been progress, so we can understand that the department doesn't necessarily follow through on the actions and with their actions on the promises made to Indigenous peoples, but I think that they fail every time, and they're not able to put into application what is needed. So there's an excuse. Yes, there's COVID. Yes, we can take that into consideration, but the commitment was in 2015, and COVID wasn't there. We can understand that there has been a slowdown because of the pandemic, but when you look at the disaster that you're presenting in your report, so I'm asking, do you really have a moral and ethical insurance that this will be the last time that you're going to have to come down on the government like that? So you can make report after report, but we keep coming back after 5-10 years to say the same thing. Well, I am very sad to see that the problem hasn't been resolved, and it's a long-standing problem. I can't really offer any kind of assurance to you. I think that it would be up to the minister to be able to ensure you of the commitment of the department to follow up and to correct the problem. We will be following very closely what they will be putting in place, because it is really important to ensure that all communities across our country do have access to have safe drinking water. So I do hope I will not have to come back in a few years to inform you that there's still problems, still gaps. So it's up to the government and the department with their commitment to work in collaboration with the community of First Nations. Thank you very much, Madame Hogan. I would like to hear now what you think with respect to the risk evaluation, with respect to water infrastructure. You're saying that everything has stayed at the same time. The 2014, 2015, there was an evaluation that was done, and they said that there were 304 of the 600 and some water system that were 50% that had a risk. And 5 years later, we come back, and despite the firm commitments, we're really at the same place. So over 2019, 3009 of the 600 and some was the same percentage. So there's still a risk here. So what does the government need to do? What does the department need to do to really improve the risks with respect to all of these major deficiencies with respect to water? Well, you're quite right. The department has a program that does look at the state of the water systems, and they establish a criteria, and there have not been changed. There's still 43% of systems that have quite a risk. And so it doesn't mean that there will be water advisories for those systems, but it is an identification as to the fact that there is a problem with the maintenance. Or maybe there are not the necessary qualified operators in place. So this is something the department needs to correct. And I think that It's related to the fact that the funding formula is totally outdated, obsolete. So until it's updated, it's going to be difficult to know whether the new funding will be sufficient to respond to the needs. So I think that this is really the first step that the department should move ahead with, to look at that funding formula and update it so that it would be ready to take into consideration all new technologies and all of the maintenance needs. Not just operations, but also maintenance.
Thank you very much, Ms. Hogan. I'm sorry I was muted and trying to get your attention. We will now move to Ms. Ashton for 6 minutes.
Thank you, Chair. The Prime Minister and the Minister of Indigenous Services promised to eliminate clean drinking water advisories on reserves by March of 2021. They failed, and it's First Nations that are paying the price. The government has blamed COVID, they've blamed climate change, they've blamed everyone but themselves. This type of dishonest and cynical politics helps no one, and it certainly doesn't eliminate boiled water advisories. The Auditor General report that we're discussing here today has been clear on the reasons for this failure. And I want to highlight particularly the way they point to the lack of funding to retaining staff and a regulatory regime that still wasn't in place 15 years after it was recommended. Quite simply, this is another example of this government saying the right things, but not backing them up with action. And the same kind of urgency that they give when big oil, for example, needs money for a pipeline. The COVID-19 pandemic has been devastating for First Nations. It has laid bare the lack of investment in First Nations communities by successive Liberal and Conservative governments, leaving these communities to fend for themselves. We must do better, and we can do better. I want to acknowledge that what the Auditor General report has made clear is that First Nations need more than just empty words and symbolic commitments when they're consistently left with broken promises, and particularly on something as fundamental, a basic human right as access to clean drinking water. They need access to clean drinking water immediately. And I'm pleased to join you in this committee today to really get at what needs to be done for us to get there, for First Nations to see that reality take place. My first question is to the Auditor General. I'm wondering if you can expand on why a sufficient regulatory regime wasn't in place. I'm thinking of First Nations like Garden Hill in our region, which actually is not even on the list of boiled water advisories. It is a First Nation that received investment for its water treatment plant after the H1N1 crisis that hit that community hard. However, we know, and this was exposed by a CBC report in 2019, that by the time water gets to homes in the community, it is not drinkable. So how is it that Garden Hill First Nation, presumably others, have fallen through the cracks and don't even make it to this list? How did we get to this point? And what can be done to ensure that communities like Garden Hill get the help that they need?
So one of our first audits back in 2005 on this issue did raise the concern about a regulatory regime, and we have seen that some progress has been made since then. So I think I need to back up just to explain what's in a regulatory regime. Typically there's an act, which the legislation and the law, but then there are also guidelines that accompany it. And it's those guidelines that really show you how to operationalize. So what we found in this audit is that the act has been in place for a few years, but the guidelines are still not finalized. Many First Nations communities, and we noted this in our report, questioned how the act was put together, that there was a lack of a meaningful engagement and consultation. And perhaps that's the reason why some of the guidelines are not finalized yet. But why this is really needed is it helps define roles and responsibilities, clear accountability when something goes wrong. It defines minimum service levels in order to be able to identify, when water is no longer safe and what advisory needs to be put in place. So it's really just about ensuring that the First Nations community have the same protections that other communities across the country have. But they have to be able to set that because they have their right to self-govern. And so they have to be able to be actively engaged in setting what those regulations should look like. And so that is one of the key steps in addition to the funding formula that's needed in order to help advance this and lift those boil water advisories on a more long-term sustainable basis.
Thank you. My next question is to ISC. We have heard repeatedly, including today, a favorite Liberal buzzword, partnership, working in partnership with First Nations. Well, I want to bring up Tatasqueat Cree Nation, which is also in our region. They've struggled without clean drinking water for years, yet ISC, Indigenous Services Canada, wasn't even testing their water for the contaminants that were making people sick, forcing the First Nation to pay out of pocket for the work that ISC refused to do. Due to Canada's failures, they launched a class action lawsuit and have spoken about their fear of government reprisals for doing this. They're now taking their complaint to the UN, and I'm proud to support their efforts in doing so, but it didn't need to come to this. When asked about these failures, a spokesperson for ISC said the following, quote, Indigenous Services Canada has supported the community in the repairs and upgrades to their water treatment centre to ensure water quality continues to meet approved guidelines, unquote. The water that makes them sick continues to meet approved guidelines. This type of disrespect is far too common. In a meeting between ISC and Tatasqueat Cree Nation in their community, an ISC official took a sip of water to demonstrate that the water was clean, seemingly ignoring the many communities members that had rashes or were otherwise sick. Does water you won't test properly that we know makes people sick continue to meet approved guidelines? And if yes, why is ISC maintaining that these guidelines are accurate? And what good do they serve outside of public perception? We know that the First Nation has been clear the water makes them sick. Why is ISC continuing this charade?
I am very sorry. We are over time. And so perhaps, Ms. Ashton, we can come back to get an answer during your next round of questioning. Thank you. We will move on to our 5-minute round and starting with Mr. Berthold.
Merci beaucoup.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. I would like to tell the witnesses I have a lot of questions, so if you could try and give us shorter answers, that'll help us. First of all, for the Auditor General, you, in your study, you did not look at the health effects of these long-term water advisories. Is this something you did on purpose, or was that something that you could have looked at? You are right. We did not include that in the scope of our audit. We could have hired health experts to help us with that initiative, but we thought that this would be something where we needed to emphasize what the government was doing with respect to their objective with respect to the 31st of March. I think maybe an element to be able to help them move faster, the government would be able to give them some information, some tangible information on the health effects on people when they have to live under these long-term advisories. This is a suggestion that I have for you for your further studies, so that we don't, and hopefully we don't have to wait for 15 years to get any results. So with respect to the pandemic, you were not able to go into the First Nations communities. Would that have maybe changed something in your results? Answer. Normally, when we do an audit with the First Nations, we do like to go visit the communities to better understand the issues and to look at the tangible evidence of what their concerns and what their needs are. So this may have changed somewhat our interaction with the communities, with the First Nations communities, but I do not think that it would have changed the conclusions we came to. Thank you very much. And for the second time in 2 weeks, you're saying you're discouraged, so I just wanted to note that, Madam Home. Madam Fox, were you consulted at your service in 2015 when it was said that that all of the problems would be solved by 2021? Well, I was not with the department at the time. I joined in September 2020, so I do not know whether in 2015 there were conversations. Would it be possible to give us an answer at a later date so that we can know? I was mayor of a city where we had a water problem, and it took 10 years to solve the problem. To think that from 2015 to 2021 in 6 years you could find all of the solutions, I thought that was a little bit unrealistic. I've seen the detailed action plans. So what is your objective? To be able to really find a solution for all these long-term water advisories? Well, thank you for the question. I think it's important to say that this plan is not only looking at long-term water advisories, but also short-term water advisories. There's 169 short-term water advisories that have been lifted. I don't know if that's how you say it in French, but all of that to say that the strategy meant that the action plan was really focusing on long-term problems. But now we have 33 communities, and we have a great transparency within the work that is being done with all of the projects. Everything is on a public website. Sorry to interrupt you, but maybe what I really wanted to know was, do you have a date? Yes. Well, I don't want to give any kind of specific date because as you yourself have said, there are things that can be set, but there are other things that where you may see delays. So what I wanted to say was the department is 100% ready to work with all of the communities in the 33 communities to get rid of these long-term water advisories. So it's very difficult to promise a date, whether you're in government or not, because there's so many variables. Simply to be able to set up a plant there or in other areas of Canada, sometimes it can takes twice as long as when you may be close to ports and materials and resources. Answer: well, sometimes yes, you need to be able to set an objective and to engage people so that you can meet your objectives. So I think that that's the work of the department, and we continue to work hard to be able to meet these deadlines. So of course we do have work to be completed, and we will not be able to meet the deadline that we set. But I do think that we have set up, with the financing, with the funding we have, with the team we have, and with the relationships we have and the partnerships that have been created with the communities, and with a transparent approach, will be, yes, we do have work to do, but I think that we're ready to work in partnership and we'll be able to move ahead.
That is the end of your time, Mr. Berthold. We will move on to Mr. Sorbera for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for the Auditor General. Thank you for the report. A lot of questions. Indigenous Services. Just to Mr. Berthold's earlier comment, I spent a lot of time last night reading through all the documents, including Mr. Weber's comments towards the budget that we recently introduced in terms of the funds and programs that we've committed to the Indigenous community across Canada, and I'm very happy to see the continuing investments. Of course, I would have loved to have received this detailed action plan last night, to have been able to review it a little more extensively. I have gone through it now, so I'm going to go to that right now. Just on the O&M side, the 100% commitment for the funding formula on O&M, is that in place today for the Indigenous communities?
Yes, it is in place today.
Okay, so there's no cost sharing like in a municipal, federal, provincial sharing. It's all in place.
Correct. That's correct.
Okay. Thank you. I would love to see, if I look at 2.3, where you break out a number of items in terms of a number of numerical amounts, just what is the annual commitment to O&M? And then it's going to be a growing one as, of course, more water advisories become lifted and more water treatment plants and purification systems come online. I would love just to know what is the annual commitment. So that's something, if someone can come back, because I'm trying to go through the numbers, and I would love to get to where it's saying we are every year we are spending, we are investing, ensuring that Indigenous communities have a safe and clean water system. And this is what. In terms of, so that's great to hear, because that is a big thing that was pointed out in the AG report. Secondly, we have, and I holistically, with the budget commitment that we've recently introduced, approximately $42 billion is being invested into the Indigenous communities across Canada. So I'm great to see that, and I just want to point that out, and including the $11 billion from the prior government. On the payments to the individuals running the water treatment plants. That is a decision by each of the Indigenous communities themselves to make, or is that in partnership with the federal government?
So in terms of the water operators and the salaries for the water operators, it is the decision of the communities to make and establish the rates. However, obviously, with the increase in O&M that we can give to the communities, then they have that ability to have competitive salaries for their communities. And just to answer your question around on a yearly basis, so in 2021 on O&M, it's 338 million, I believe, and by 2025 we're going to be at about 400 million.
Okay.
Per year on O&M.
And who the contracting, the putting out to bid, the request for proposal for these treatment plants to do that? Obviously, from an economies of scale perspective, does that happen from the federal government and then turned over to the Indigenous community? So not each Indigenous community has to develop its own expertise in order to do this, or is this something that there's a partnership? Can you describe that process?
Yes, absolutely. Thank you for the question. So I think it definitely is a partnership process. We do not want to be at the federal government selecting contractors for Indigenous communities. We would like that Indigenous leadership make those choices. However, we do want to work with them. And if they require support or information or additional capacity to work with them, then we're absolutely prepared to do that. But at the end of the day, we really want them to be making the decisions that are best for them.
Okay. And on page 4 of your introductory remarks, I am sort of a numbers person. I like to think about the world in that sort of sense. 105 long-term drinking water advisors in November 2015. We've obviously more have been added as we go along, and some have been taken off. 106 lifted. When it comes to the interim measures, when we introduced interim measures, which obviously mean that water can be consumed and so forth, are interim measures, are those lifted and then counted as lifted advisories, or is there still put in a separate bucket of projects that are still ongoing? How do we account for that when we use interim measures?
If there is an interim measure, it could lift the water advisory, yes, but I think at the what we try to do is work with communities to make sure that if the interim measures are in place, we lift the advisory, we still work with them on the longer term solution. And I think what this additional funding allows us to do is to do that work with them.
Okay. And finally, the resources dedicated to lifting all the water advisors. Obviously, COVID-19 has delayed many things in terms on construction side, even in terms of going to certain communities, because we don't obviously want COVID-19, the variant there, or any of the variants there, or the virus there. But the resources are sufficient to lift the remaining long-term water advisories.
Yes, we have a long-term commitment of funding of O&M. So for capital infrastructure, for O&M funding, and I would say that the O&M funding is key. It is key because it allows us to track, to monitor, and to avoid deficiencies in the long term.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Sobera. We will now go to our 2.5-minute round, starting with Mr. Blanchant-Jonca.
Merci, Madame la Présidente.
Thank you, Madam Chair. My question is going to be for Madame Fox. Well, welcome to the committee. I think it's probably not the best day for you when you have to come before the Public Accounts Committee, but we do appreciate the work that your organization has done. But I think we need to look at some progress in terms of what's happening for drinking water in Indigenous communities. I think in terms of fundamental needs, this is a more than essential service. So your report, the report is quite eloquent. I understand that there has been some progress. There have been many initiatives to try and improve the situation, but I would like you to tell us in clear terms, do you think it's acceptable that communities have to boil water every day to be able to drink it, and that for more than 10 years? Answer. What I can tell you is that, of course, we have an action plan and the commitment from the government to be able to to lift all of these water advisories, the long-term advisories, so that people have access to safe drinking water. This is what we're motivated by. We want to, and we're taking action, and we're going to be continuing the work in order to avoid this type of long-term water advisory. So we do agree all Canadians should have access to safe drinking water. Question, Madame Fox. Well, I understand, but if 10 years, I think it's hard really to understand it. When you look at all of the reports of the Auditor General, and I'm trying to understand, yes, of course, the COVID slowed things down, But at what time did your department already know, even before COVID, things had moved forward? But the government in December 2020, they were saying, well, they wanted to let us know before the Auditors General came out that they would not be able to meet their deadline. So I'm wondering, I'm not sure that you only found out in December 2020. COVID had already been around for almost a year. So when did your department really know that COVID was really literally going to be slowing things down in terms of the work being done? Answer, I think that's important. December 2020.
Be a very short answer.
Well, in 2020, the department noted that if we're going to be starting to look at what the impacts of COVID would be, we reevaluated things over the summer when the second wave seemed to be going down, that we would be able to maybe go ahead with work. But with the third wave that started picking up in September and October, and things were worse in the Indigenous communities, it was then that we had to look at when we saw all of those cases and we saw the number of closures, we realized that, well, we're not going to be able to meet the commitment and the deadline. Thank you.
Ms. Ashton for 2.5 minutes.
Thank you. I'd like to ask Indigenous Services Canada to respond to the reality of Tatasquia at Cree Nation. So again, my question is, the First Nation has been clear that that the water in their community is undrinkable, yet ISC maintains that guidelines are being met. So if yes, why are you maintaining guidelines, and what good are they if they are making people sick?
So first of all, you raised the question in your last intervention around sort of whether or not we would penalize people who are taking legal action. I would say that categorically, no, we would not. We respect the right of Indigenous groups to take the decisions that they need to take for their communities. In terms of the water, the guidelines that we have are based on science, and we want to work in lockstep with communities. And in situations where people feel the water is unsafe, not only will we do the testing, but we will also work with our environmental health officers and look at what we can do. If there are things happening in the community that require health intervention, it becomes also not just a water issue, it becomes the health supports for that community. And we would continue to provide that and be based on science for the guidelines, but also a recognition of if something is happening, we want to work in partnership with leadership to address that.
Well, I would urge you to do so. I mean, something is happening, and the First Nation has made clear going to court is not their number one choice. What they want is clean water now, and let's be honest, Canada is able to deliver that. Political will is what we need to see. I do want to go back to the Auditor General and ask her about another First Nation in our region, Shamattawa. Shamattawa First Nation has had a long-term boiled water advisory, a housing crisis, a tuberculosis outbreak, and it received national news for its devastating COVID-19 outbreak before Christmas. It was so serious that the military had to step in full force. Few communities in this country have had to bear the brunt of Canada's failures like Shamattawa First Nation. I'm wondering if you can expand on how the housing crisis in particular affects communities' capacity to deliver safe cleaning water, and what needs to be done to get at these crises together.
A very short answer, Ms. Hogan.
I guess what I would add to that really quickly is we have studied all of these issues that many First Nations face, and when there is a housing crisis, there is overcrowding in homes, and as we've seen throughout the pandemic, that just makes situations worse. I think the only thing I would say about drinking water is that the public systems are those that serve 5 houses or more. There are so many systems in First Nations reserves that are operated by First Nations or by the homeowner. And this is where training is so important so that the communities can take care of drinking water on all their systems, not just the public ones going forward.
Thank you very much, Ms. Ashton. We will now go to our next round of questions, 5 minutes, starting with Mr. Lawrence.
Thank you very much. And my first question will be for the Auditor General. I just wanted to make sure I understood something, I wanted to clarify it. There are 43% of systems that are at risk. Is that clear? And what exactly does at risk mean?
So the reference is to a process that Indigenous Services Canada has where they do an annual risk assessment of the state of a water system, and 43% of them have been rated as high or medium risk, meaning that they likely haven't had their maintenance done, perhaps they don't have trained operators. So there's a set of criteria that allow the department to rate the state of a system, and 43% of them have rated high, which is an indication that perhaps there will be water advisories, but at least an indication that you need to pay attention to those systems because maintenance is likely not happening the way it should be happening.
And one of the things that came across in the report to me, and maybe you can confirm this or correct me, is that it seemed to be in your report that you were a little concerned that the government was focusing too much perhaps on getting short-term solutions, but not focusing on the long-term, such as making sure there were enough operators, et cetera. Is that a correct thing to be pulling out from your report?
We did highlight that in the report, that many of the long-term drinking water advisories that were lifted were by interim measures. We did note, however, that some of those systems had long-term plans, but that they would not be in place until about 2024 or 2025. And just lifting an advisory doesn't mean you fix the underlying issue. And that's why it's not a cookie cutter approach across communities, that each community needs to have its unique long-term sustainable solution. And we shouldn't just be focusing on lifting advisories, but on getting those long-term solutions in place.
And so just to clear as well, I want to make sure, I think this pulled up in the other question, but I want to make sure I have it right. So in 2015, there were 43% of the systems that were high risk, and in 2020, there were also 43% of high risk systems. Is that correct, or do I have that incorrect?
High or medium risk, you have that correct, 43%.
Okay. One of the things that has bothered me a little bit, and I know everyone here, especially including the folks who are senior bureaucrats here, want to make sure this is taken care of. But I saw a dissonance in between your report and the reaction of Ms. Fox. And you used the harshest language I've seen so far in any of your reports when you said disheartened. What degree of confidence do you have in that the government will eventually eliminate all drinking advisories, as I know everyone here desperately wants to have happen?
Honestly, I'm disheartened for First Nations communities because so many of us across the country take for granted that when this meeting's over, we're going to walk over to the tap and pour ourselves a glass of water. And so many communities can't do that. And that's really what saddens me about all of this. I can't give you assurances. I do think that that's where the department needs to demonstrate through their action plans and the updating of the funding formula that they're going to work in collaboration with First Nations communities to address this. And not just, as I mentioned earlier, focusing on lifting long-term drinking water advisories or short-term, but on finding those long-term sustainable solutions and making sure that First Nations have adequately trained operators and good long-term operating and maintenance funding.
Thank you. Over to you, Ms. Fox. I will just let you just comment on the Auditor General's comments right there. And the rest assured, I believe 110% your intentions are good and that you work, I'm sure, hours and hours to try and solve these issues. But I just see a distance. I'm not sure. And do you realize the issue here and why Canadians are concerned?
Oh, absolutely. I realize the issue. Absolutely, I'm committed to it, and absolutely, the department is committed to it. There's no doubt. And we are, the conversations that we are having with our partners, but also with the OAG, to kind of take very seriously the recommendations that they've brought to us and how it can help inform the way forward. And so we have a responsibility to do this well and over the long term. And this department's mandate is to actually transform all of our services into the leadership of Indigenous communities. And to do that, we have to get ourselves ready for that transformation and empower Indigenous leaders to take a system on that is fully operational and well and running well. So there is no doubt we are 100% committed to this. And we've got regular discussions with our partners within our team to make sure that we are making progress, that we are working collectively to make a difference, that we are. Sorry.
Thank you very much. We are over time. We will now move to the next questioner, which is Mr. Blois.
I'm gonna pass my time to Miss Yip, but I'll come back in the next round, Madam Chair.
Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, everyone, for all your hard work on this topic. I always feel particularly saddened that our own Indigenous communities do not have the same rights of safe drinking water as the rest of us. So this is important work. My first question is to Ms. Hogan, and it concerns your comments about feeling disheartened about these programs. What do you think the most important recommendation is?
Well, I want to tell you that all of our recommendations are important recommendations. I do think addressing the funding formula is a key one. Being able to ensure that there's that stable base of funding, not only for building the infrastructure, but the operation and maintenance. You can have a state-of-the-art facility, and if you don't maintain it, eventually that's going to cause a problem down the road. That operating and maintenance funding is linked to the ability of First Nations communities to attract and retain trained and certified water system operators, and also having a backup operator. What we found in our audit is there was many systems that I think it was 26% that lacked a trained and certified operator, and then 56% that lacked a backup operator. Those are really fundamental things to maintaining access to safe drinking water. So if I had to pick one out of all of them, I would focus in on that funding formula and making sure that it's updated and meets the needs and new technologies that communities need.
Do you think that there's enough resources or thought put into having these maintenance contracts to ensure that these water operators will be there, and also be continually trained, and perhaps have outside support come as well to do more training and support?
I believe that's why one of my comments earlier on was that until the funding formula is updated, it's difficult to determine if the additional commitment of funding will be sufficient to meet the current needs of the First Nations communities. I do think it's also something that will need to be monitored going forward. It's not going to be a one and done solution, to make sure that that ongoing maintenance and operating funding is adjusted. Currently, it's only adjusted for inflation, but not for other things. And that's why that funding formula update is pretty key to helping support the solution for this.
Did the OAG work with the First Nations leadership for this audit at all?
So during our planning, we did have some conversations with First Nations communities. As we mentioned earlier, we try to always go visit them. Because of the pandemic, we were unable to do that. And we do have some difficulties trying to do so virtually with them, but it is always our objective to make sure that we consider the points of and opinions of First Nations communities whenever we do any audit work that affects them.
Were you able to speak to any of the band leaders?
I think I'm going to ask Glenn Wheeler to maybe talk about that, since he would have been there from the start to finish, and he'd be able to give you more details on it.
Madam Chair, no, we were unable to speak to individual First Nations during this audit, as the Auditor General has mentioned. We typically do that, but the reality is that a lot of First Nations were dealing with COVID and the impact of COVID during the time period of our audit, and it didn't make sense for us to do that detailed work or consultation we would typically do with First Nations. We did speak with the Assembly of First Nations, however, and some of their experts to get their views on water. Madam Chair.
So it wasn't possible to do virtual meetings with them?
Madam Chair, it wasn't possible in this audit. However, when we did some earlier planning before COVID, so we did long-term planning on where to focus future audit work, we did visit a number of First Nations and their water treatment plants and speak to their water treatment operators, to their band managers, to get a sense of what the issues were. But that was before we formally started this audit, Madam Chair.
Ms. Fox, how many short-term watery advisories are there, and how can the department prevent these short-term water advisories from becoming long-term ones?
I will need you to provide a very short answer, please.
The time goes
Sorry,
fast.
I'm just looking at my chart. We've lifted 179 short term, and I'm going to have to get you the precise number. I don't want to mislead you. So I'll get you the precise number of how many short term are active right now.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Sorry, 9. 9 is the answer. It's here.
Thank you very much, Ms. Yip. We will now go to our next round of questioning, which is 6 minutes, starting with Mr. Lawrence.
Thank you very much. And just wanted to go back to you, Ms. Fox, in the line of questioning we were on. Have you received? Of course, we had the pledge to have the all drinking water advisories done initially by this spring. Have you? What is the recalibrated goal now that the government has acknowledged that obviously we won't be achieving that goal?
Mm-hmm. So yes, as I mentioned, there's 33 communities that still have 52 long-term drinking water advisories. So we're going to continue to work very closely with them. What we're looking at in the short term is, what kind of progress can be made over the next few months, especially taking into account the spring and summer construction. Obviously, with COVID still very present in a number of communities, we're looking to see what can and can't be done and what types of security measures could be put in place in terms of rapid testing and other types of supports that we could provide if communities decide that they want to proceed with construction or maintenance. So I can tell you that we remain committed to it. I can tell you that we've got an action plan for each of the 33 communities, but it would be premature for me to put a time frame on this today, just given the fact that we're still living in the midst of COVID. And I really want to make sure that we have conversations with First Nations and that they tell us when they feel that it's the right time to either just fix, build, whatever process and step they're in.
Thank you, Ms. Fox. But on the bigger scale, as I discussed with the AG, we were at 43% at high medium risk. We're at 43% high medium risk. When will we be in the next 5 years? Will we get down to zero? Everyone here, and I know probably you most of all want to get to zero, but we need to know for the Indigenous communities out there when we will be at zero for high to medium risk.
Yeah, I think that first of all, maybe it would be helpful for the committee in terms of the risk rating. We do have kind of very specific sort of points that we look at a risk rating of a system. So the water source, the system design, the system operation and maintenance, the operator training and certification, and the record keeping and reporting. Those are sort of the high level sort of metrics that we measure a high risk or a medium risk system. And so as we've, as we look at the recommendations of the OAG, as we look at the budget investments over the last cycles, we have to see how do we address that so we bring that number down. So that high risk has come down. High risk right now is at about 15% of projects, and you noted the 43 for high and medium. But I think as we look at long-term solutions and not interim, that gives us less of a high risk nature. As we look at more funding for operators and maintenance and they're active in the communities, we again reduce that risk factor. So we'll continue to monitor.
Thank you. I'm concerned, and I understand your intentions are good, but words like commitment and engagement and investments don't cut it for people who right now cannot get a clean water. We need commitments in terms of times and deadlines, and et cetera. And on that, I'd like to cede the rest of my time to Ms. Ashton for her questioning. As I think it's been great and critical.
Thank you very much to my colleague for that. My question is to the Auditor General, and I want to raise the issue of Red Sucker Lake. Red Sucker Lake has a water treatment plant that was constructed in 1995. We know that the infrastructure in Red Sucker Lake First Nation to deliver dependable and clean drinking water is simply not where it needs to be. In fact, when Red Sucker Lake was dealing with the COVID-19 outbreak before the end of December, it took the Canadian forces to come in and identify clearly that only one water truck to service the community was not only not adequate, but it was actually contributing to making people sick with COVID-19. These are catastrophic implications. The AG report referred to how in many cases ISC seem to rely on short-term solutions like water trucks and not enough of them to solve water advisories. But what we saw with Red Sucker Lake is that's not what's needed. What is keeping Indigenous Services Canada from making the investments necessary to ensure communities don't have to rely on unsafe water practices like in the case of Red Sucker Lake?
I do acknowledge that's when so many communities have to deal with short-term and long-term drinking water advisories and all these temporary measures, that they lose confidence in their water system. And that is definitely something that needs to be reversed and addressed. All I can tell you is what we found in our audit that showed the lack of the department's ability to meet its commitment, and I linked it to a lack of a regulatory regime and issues with the funding formula, and then hence the inappropriate funding to those communities. Your more pointed question will have to go to the department as to why it's taken so long to address those matters.
Well, let's turn it to the department. In the case of Red Sucker Lake, why has it taken so long? And frankly, the Canadian forces to show up to say that what they're facing is downright unsafe.
A very short answer, please.
A very short answer. I think I would say that in situations like Shamattawa, Red Sucker Lake, and what we've seen in COVID, we have been working in lockstep with community leadership to support them during this pandemic. And as you noted, there has been, COVID has pointed to the lack of housing and some of the other socioeconomic gaps that exist. And what I can say is we are committed to working with Red Sucker Lake, with Shamattawa, and using these investments to have long-term solutions for the community.
Thank you very much, Ms. Ashton. We will now go to Mr. Blois for 6 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you to the witnesses for their testimony today. Obviously, this is a very serious situation. It has a lot of legacy, as we know from the Auditor General's report, and you know, I look to Exhibit 3.2 in the hopes that we are making a difference. I know that's cold comfort to communities that don't yet have access to clean drinking water. But there has been marked improvement, and our hopes is that we can continue with this work to be able to get there. My first question is to Ms. Fox. Help me understand the role of Indigenous Services Canada as it relates to the operation and the actual capital on Indigenous communities. I know some Indigenous communities use own source revenue. They have some of their own operations internally. Is the expectation that the federal government provides 100% of the necessary capital, or is there some working partnership there at all?
Well, I think thank you for the question. I think it's really important to kind of flag what is the role of Indigenous Services Canada. The role is actually to work with leadership of Indigenous communities to make determinations about sort of what they need to support their communities. And sometimes water is at the top of that list for very obvious reasons. And then sometimes there are other priorities. It could be a school construction build or a housing project. And so we have to, rather than sort of dictate, we have to kind of listen and say, okay, what are those priorities that you have identified? And yes, there may be some communities that say that they would use own source revenue to do various types of infrastructure. But I think what our commitment to First Nations communities is, for water infrastructure, we can provide that 100% capital. We can provide that 100% O&M to allow you to do those projects in the quickest way possible, and thinking about it from a long-term perspective. But it is a partnership, and the decision can't come from our department. The decision has to come from the First Nations leadership, and that's how we guide our work, and it is for eventual full transformation.
I want to take you to Exhibit 3.3, Ms. Fox, where we have about somewhere between 15 to 20, if I read the graph right, long-term advisories that have been 15 years or longer. Mm-hmm. Intrinsically, to me, this is not necessarily just a money issue. This is capacity, this is geography, this is a whole host of things. Is it fair to say that in some of the communities, I know even in my own in Nova Scotia, these are communities that because of colonization, they were located in areas and terrains that were not desired? Is part of this issue with some of these long terms actually finding quality water to actually provide to the community, or is it just the infrastructure? And can you speak to that a little bit?
Yeah, I think I can say that there are real complexities with some of these systems, and it does not take away from the importance of doing it and for the quick action that is required to address them. But I would say that depending on where a First Nation community is in the country, it will have an impact both in terms of the water source, the availability of contractors, the availability of people to get up there. So there's a different scale. There are some that are probably easier in nature than others, but absolutely there are different levels of complexities.
I want to go to 3.38, and I think you might have touched on this with Mr. Lawrence, but just so I'm sure, there was at that point, there was about 60. This was November 2020. There was 60. There was a commitment to try to have at least 33. Did I hear that it's 27 that got eliminated since November of 2020? Is that fair?
That 27 that got eliminated since November? No, not quite. I believe that in the November report, there was about 96 that had been lifted. And as of March, there was 106. So just those are the data points that I have in terms of lifts.
Okay, and maybe I could ask for a submission because I don't want to spend too much more time, but it's 3.38 on the Auditor General's report that talks about as of November 20th, there was still 60 in effect, and the department thought that there could be up to 33 that would be eliminated by March 31st of 2020. If you could get that information to the committee, I would certainly appreciate it. The Auditor General's report, Ms. Fox, also talks about 1/3 of water that's used in communities is not through the public utility model, in the sense that this is coming from wells and other sources. I know that's generally the domain of the local community, the Indigenous community. Is there any programming in place, as quickly as you can? Is that part of your mandate as well in the department to support outcomes in that space?
The focus is on public utility. If ever there would be conversations about needs outside of that, we're always talking to communities about their needs, but the program is focused on public utility.
Thank you. I want to go to the Auditor General. Ms. Hogan, we've talked a lot about regulations, and I've had the chance to look through the actual legislation from 2013. With respect, it's relatively straightforward and it's a relatively short act. Why is it that regulations matter? Because surely, I mean, you talk about policies, and I don't even think the department's in disagreement, but help me understand as a parliamentarian why regulations matter, especially if we're looking to try to address things. You know, even ministers then have to gazette, they have to amend regulations. Why can't this just be a set policy working with Indigenous communities? Why does it have to be in regulatory form to be the most effective?
So I'm not a lawyer, but I'm going to do my best at explaining why all of this matters. The act, as you say, is rather short. That's the legislative framework, and the regulations are really how you operationalize that. And they will set then the minimum standards, right? So the minimum threshold for water. They will define service levels, define accountabilities when something goes wrong, who needs to take action. And so it's really how you operationalize the legislative framework that's outlined in the Act. That's the fundamentals. Why that's needed is that First Nations communities need that hook, like every other community, in order to make sure that they're meeting they know what level to target and what to do when they can't meet those. So it is just a fundamental way to give you the same protections that the rest of the country have.
Thank you very much. We will now go on to Mr. Blanchette-Jonca for 6 minutes.
Merci, Madame la Présidente.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm going to ask Madam Fox my questions earlier. I'm wondering if you understood my question. I was asking about the evolution of the situation. I did listen earlier. You talked about collaboration, transparency. Those are all good things. And I think the action plan that you have, you're accepting recommendations. So we do hope that will give results. But I'm wondering about the collaboration in the report. It notes that there's that legislative framework issues, and so I'm wondering, with respects to consultation, that needs to happen, of course. But I'm wondering if collaboration and consultation was done when you looked at the Act in 2013, the Safe Drinking Water Act for First Nations Act. So what explains that your department never noted where you need to change the legislative framework? Thank you for the question. And yes, this law is in place since 2013, and there are needs to bring changement, but our partners and First Nation partners, do not agree with some of the elements of the bill that was tabled in 2013. So yes, we're ready to work with them. So once we do have a bill that will be developed together, working with them, well, I think at that point there would be a way to work with the regulations together, but we don't want to move ahead with that on our own. So a bill needs to be co-developed, and so we're ready to work with our partners, our First Nation partners, to go ahead and do that. Question. So if we come back to this, is a commitment from 2015. There were 160 long-term water advisors in the First Nations communities, and the government said that we're going to be able to solve the problem before the 31st of March 2021. And so if there hadn't been COVID, would really the government have been able to solve all the problems before March 2021? Answer. Well, I would say that even at the beginning of spring 2020, we were still looking to find ways to work together with the communities and the action plan to see what could be done. So that was our objective at the time, and I think that it was really in the third wave in the summer and the beginning of the fall that we really noted that we would need more time. But I do think that we really realize the needs to have long-term solutions and not simply short-term solutions. So that's why our deadlines moved back. And question, was it the objective and the timeline that weren't realistic? Because then you could set COVID aside. But the Auditor General's report said that even before the pandemic that there was a slowing down of certain projects, and many of them were already not working. So that's not the fault of the pandemic. So is it incompetence? Was it a lack of realistic objectives? What exactly was the problem? You have a plan of action. You have something for another plan of action for 5-10 years, but I want people to be living in an unacceptable situation for another period of time. Answer. I agree with you. We do share the same objective. We want everyone to have access to safe drinking water, but we're working on it, and we were looking at the calendar, we were looking at the reality in the communities, and we were looking at delays in construction, and we were looking at with a huge motivation to be able to move ahead and achieve our objectives by March 2021. And then we said, well, yes, there are still 33 communities where there are water advisories, but we are completely committed and motivated to solve the issues for these 33 communities. So I just also wanted to note that this water, it's not simply the long-term water advisories. The fact that we were able to get rid of a huge number of short-term water advisories. There are many people that aren't in long-term problems. So I don't want to minimize the work that was done to get rid of these short-term water advisories. Question. Well, you're looking at the whole situation. We have this deadline of the 31st of March 2021. At what point in time did you think that, well, okay, we're not going to be able to manage to meet our deadline? Well, answer. I think that it was over the summer and fall 2020 was the time when we saw the impact of COVID. And I would say that the second wave that happened within that period of October to January within the First Nations community, all of our attention was on COVID. At the time, we had 5,000 cases in the communities and on reserves, and so that we needed to take care of that COVID-19 problem, and that's where we said, well, we can't even, it's not responsible for us to be having construction people go into the communities until we have taken care of health, mental health, access to food, and the sense of isolation that was in these communities that were really impacted by COVID. That was the main concern for our commitments to the First Nations community. Question. So, Madame Fox.
Mr. Blanchette, you basically have 7 seconds left. We will now move on to Ms. Ashton for 6 minutes.
Thank you. And my question to the Auditor General. York Factory First Nation has now gone 6 weeks without clean drinking water and have declared a state of emergency after their so-called, quote, state-of-the-art water treatment plant that was built 1 year ago failed them, forcing them, like TCN, to pay out of pocket for both testing and clean drinking water. The chronic water shortages have forced the school, the daycare, and the restaurant to close and left them without proper fire and emergency services. All of this during this pandemic right now. I'm sure we can all agree that this situation is unacceptable. In your report, you make reference to how woefully insufficient funding to maintain water treatment plants has been. And according to the auditor, to the report, ISC operations and maintenance funding formula is out of date. So what is the government not doing that leads to communities with state-of-the-art, so-called water treatment plants to be without clean drinking water?
Unfortunately, I don't think I can speak specifically to that community. I don't know whether they were where they would fit in some of our findings, and I'm not sure that even my colleague Glenn could get there. So, I mean, if you wanted something more specific, we could probably get back to you on that. But all I can point you to is our overall findings again, and then refer you to the department for some more specifics about that community. But I do acknowledge that all of this is very interconnected, and that access to safe drinking water is so much more. It has so many ripple effects through a community, and you rightfully point out that it's unacceptable in Canada in 2021 for many First Nations communities to be in this situation.
We can't hear you.
Ms. Ashton?
Thank you. To the Auditor General again, I've referenced multiple First Nations in our region: Tatasqueyak Cree Nation, Shamattawa First Nation, Red Sucker Lake, York Factory, Garden Hill, and that's in our riding alone. This repeats itself across the country, and it shouldn't have to be this way. It's something we regularly hear from this government, but what the AG report, what your report made clear, is that this government hasn't done the work, not just last summer, but we're talking over a number of years. Now, the government won't give us a deadline of when their commitment to end clean drinking water advisories for First Nations by March of 21st will be complete. The briefing notes sent quite late this morning mentioned that you believe that long-term solutions for some communities won't be in place till at least 2025. This is an unacceptable failure by Indigenous Services Canada and this Liberal government, but they haven't been willing to give an actual timeline. In your opinion, did this year's budget deal with the lack of funding to solve the problem, or was it just more empty words from this government?
I was very happy to see a renewed commitment for additional operating and maintenance funding in the fall economic statement and in the budget. But as I mentioned in my opening remarks, it is difficult to know whether that funding will be sufficient in our view until the funding formula updates have been addressed and taken care of. It shouldn't just factor in what the funding formula believes now is the right funding for each First Nation. It should consider advances in technology and other factors, and also ensure that operator salaries can be addressed in that bucket. So I think until that funding formula is addressed, it is difficult to know whether it'll be sufficient.
And quickly, my question to ISC, does your department see it acceptable? I mean, I've referenced numerous First Nations in our riding that still don't have access to clean drinking water. Is it acceptable that in Canada in 2021, a country as rich as ours, that First Nations continue to face this situation?
So no, it is not acceptable. We believe that all Canadians should have access to clean drinking water, absolutely, and that's what pushes and motivates our department to work directly with chiefs and council to address these issues. You mentioned York Factory. We have been in touch. We have teams on standby 24/7 to take calls from Indigenous leaders, whether it be water issues, fire, mental health supports, COVID. And in terms of York Factory, the water is back up and running. However, the chief and council have decided that they want to do additional testing before they turn it back on. So we are, when issues arise, we want to be responsive and we want to work in lockstep with them to try to address those concerns.
Finally, if I could just make a closing remark, I really appreciate the work of the AG team on this. I would like to point out, as was raised by other colleagues, that you know, perhaps a veiled attack on the lack of a response from First Nations leaders. First Nations leaders have been fighting for their lives and the lives of their members of their community. So this idea that somehow the AG report is not as legitimate because they didn't hear from them is so wrong and an unacceptable attack, frankly. The chief of Red Sucker Lake had COVID himself when he was fighting for a second water truck for his community. The struggle is very real, and this is not the time to play political games. I very much appreciate the work that's being done to address this human rights violation in Canada right now. First Nations deserve clean drinking water now. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Ashton. We will now move into our next round of questioning, starting with Mr. Weber for 5 minutes.
Okay, thank you, Madam Chair. I had originally asked this question to Ms. Hogan back in March when you tabled the reports. It's about the hiring practices on First Nation communities. And of course, Ms. Hogan indicated that it wasn't part of her audit. So I will ask you, Ms. Fox, you know, what role does the federal government have in the hiring practices of First Nation communities? I specifically asked Ms. Hogan, and I'll ask you, Ms. Fox, also, whether or not any First Nation reserves have restricted water supply jobs to Indigenous and band workers only, and if so, whether this affects their ability to find qualified people to fill these positions, and whether this has created any continuity issues in the plant's operations.
So thank you for the question. I think what I would say is that the department is involved in terms of providing funding to First Nations leadership, but it is the responsibility of the First Nations to manage the contract. But of course, through the terms and conditions of our funding, there are certain requirements, and so and we really try to offer that if they need any types of supports in terms of the contract, setting up the contract, or in terms of contractors, we're happy to work with them, but ultimately the decision is theirs. With respect to your question around whether or not the decisions of kind of the water maintenance operators is absolutely up to the chief and council in terms of who they hire to do these supports. And I think, as I've mentioned, the O&M funding now that is available really allows them to give them competitive salaries, to recruit youth in their communities and women, and really work with them. So I would have, the question is best placed with them in the sense of have they held back on hiring. I haven't been privy to that type of information. I think now what we can say is, with investment, especially that 1.5 billion of operation and funding in the fall economic statement, they're really well positioned to hire the talent that they need to monitor their systems. And then through the department's circuit rider training program, that they can be supported through a group of learners, facilitators, to allow them to really have the impact in their communities and on their systems.
Yeah, thank you for that. And that leads to, my question here also. First of all, there was a survey conducted by a consortium of universities led by Concordia on, they found that, 2/3 of water operators on First Nations reserves were earning lower than the median wage of operators elsewhere outside of reserves. Sometimes they are working close to minimum wage, and while often on call 24/7. Many of the operations operate this way in First Nation communities, with the safety of their drinking water reliant on just one or a few underpaid and overworked operators. So I know it's, as you had indicated, that is not your role to determine salaries and such, but certainly with this new funding in place, they can look at these wages, as you've indicated. So I just think that it's incredibly important that we look at retention here. It was brought up by Mr. Longfield and Mr. Sabera as well. Retention, it seems to be a recurring issue, and so again, is it up it is up to the First Nation communities then to determine the wages and salaries. And would bonuses be much cheaper than the costs associated with water advisories? It just makes sense to me to pay them a fair wage. Any comments on that, Ms. Fox?
I think what I would say is, I think with the investments that we've made in budget 2019 and the fall economic statement about sort of the O&M, it allows them to increase their wages because now we're at 100% of that O&M funding formula. So I think it does, to your point, really give the chief and council the opportunity to pay fair wages. If a community were to decide to kind of supplement for performance, like that would be entirely up to them, and we would obviously be supportive of that. I also think it's important to note that the skills and training and the continued training and learning as new technologies come into play is really important. And this O&M funding allows that, as new water technologies and as kind of people can survey the water systems remotely versus doing the testing more manually, all of those things are incorporated in this additional funding of O&M to allow for that. But it is up to band and council to make those final decisions, but they need to have the funding to be able to do that, and that's what we're trying to provide.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Weber. We will now go to Mr. Fergus for 5 minutes.
Madame la Présidente, compte tenu de mon absence.
Madam Chair, since I was not here this morning, I'm going to let Mr. Blois take my spot.
Thank you very much, Mr. Fergus. Mr. Blois.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And Mr. Weber was hitting on this in terms of capacity. And so my question to the Auditor General is, you've looked at this, this has a legacy issue in terms of clean water on reserves. You talked about reports in 2005, 2011. Is this issue just a money issue, or is there more at play here in terms of how we get it? We talk about the budget allocations. I'm proud of the fact that our government's stepping up to put more money on the table, but is money alone going to be something that's going to solve some of these challenges?
Well, we didn't really address this in the audit. In my opinion, money alone is not enough. Money is absolutely needed when you make commitments, create laws, regulations, that you need the funding to support the infrastructure and the investment and the time that needs to go with all of these things. So it isn't just about money, but money is definitely an important aspect. I think one of the last thing I would highlight is probably the training that would then be needed to maintain sort of those trained operators. But what we've seen across so many of our audits on Indigenous issues is that this is not unique to water treatment plants. The ability to attract and retain resources when it comes to nursing staff, mental health practitioners, there's so many issues, and it's very interconnected in the North and on reserves around housing. And so it isn't just money. There's a much bigger, broader, more comprehensive issue.
Capacity seems to be the. With that, Ms. Fox, just as a follow-up quickly to Mr. Weber, I mean, he mentioned, and if I take his report at face value, I don't have it in front of me, but two-thirds of individuals that are working in these spaces might be near or around minimum wage. I have to assume that when Indigenous Services puts its block of funding to Indigenous communities, it would not just be on a basis of minimum wage. What type of accountability or what type of oversight, if any, do we have to ensure that the block of funding is supporting certain outcomes like improved minimum wage or ensuring that people, the money's in place to retrain these types of workers that we need?
Mm-hmm. Thank you so much. It's a great question. And I think that, I think what's really important to note is we have to, again, and I've come to this point a lot, but it's about the partnership and it's about that respectful relationship, and it's about Indigenous leaders making those decisions. So, but of course, we want to work with them on, because they'll have skills and training needs in their community for broader infrastructure, for water infrastructure. And it's about sort of really working closely with them to empower them to make those decisions and provide them with the resources to enable that decision making, right? Because if you don't have that, sorry, go ahead.
No, I just want to hammer down on this though. But when you set your allocation of funding to Indigenous communities, surely as part of that funding model, the actual amount that you would allocate would take into consideration the amount of employees that might be needed per community, and would surely not be based at minimum wage. Is that a fair statement?
Yes, but at the end of the day, we cannot dictate what the salary will be for that worker in that community.
Okay, no, that was my question. Ms. Fox, you talked about this earlier about you want to be able to get to the point that you're able to even enable Indigenous communities to take even more leadership in terms of departments such as water. You mentioned certainly right now, it seems like the Indigenous services will provide funding, and we've talked about how we need to increase that funding. There's capacity building. You know, in the minute and 15 seconds that I have left, what in your mind actually looks like Indigenous communities enabling and having that final leadership say? Because it seems like we've already devolved a lot of that power outside of actually the funding to Indigenous communities. Does that look like raising their own source revenue with community? Like, what does that actually look like in your mind?
Yeah, I think it's an excellent question. Like it would be things like the environmental public health officers, for instance, that do the testing. At this point right now, we're in the process of transferring that responsibility and that funding from sort of, the employees that I have here at Indigenous Services Canada to funding people in communities to take on those roles and provide that kind of skills and training. So it's not limited to the operators. It's about sort of health transformation and working with communities so that the Indigenous Services Canada nurses become now nurses of the community. It's all part of our overall government's objective to transform those services, and water is one of them. And you're right, we're making progress towards that transformation by empowering leadership to take on these responsibilities. And I think that we'll continue to do that throughout our mandate here.
I think, Madam Chair, that might be my time. Although I wish I had more. Thank you.
Yes, right on time. Thank you so much, Ms. Fox and Mr. Blois. We will now move into our last round of questioning, 2.5 minutes, starting with Mr. Blanchette-Jonca.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I have a question for Madam Fox. I'm trying to understand this deadline to solve all problems by the 31st of March 2021. Was it really realistic? I understand that the pandemic really messed things up, but answer. I think that in all infrastructure projects, there are realities that means that sometimes you have delays. So I can't say that there were no delays before COVID-19. Yes, of course, we always have projects that sometimes they go faster, sometimes they go slower. We're working together with the community so that we can understand where we're at with the project, with the deadlines, and if we have delays, how we're going to be able to catch up at some point. So that was the reality even before COVID-19, but COVID-19 really did have a very, very strong impact on projects, on some infrastructure projects, not simply on water type projects. So that we did need to rethink everything, and we realized that with the closure of different communities, well, we had to push our deadline past 31st of March 2021. Thank you very much for the answer. So there was problems with the pandemic, but there were delays with the projects. What I want to know with respect to the percentage of if the same problem was there as in 2015, roughly 50% of the water systems have a high degree of risk. So we're in the same situation. So what really caused that problem, and why was there never any improvement over 5 years? Answer. Well, first of all, with respect to your comment, I want to confirm that the department was working over the spring and through summer and fall, and it was only in the fall that the minister confirmed that we would not be able to continue any work within those deadlines. So I just want to make that point clear. With respect to the 50% of risky systems at risk, we saw that we were getting to a 20% based on our evaluation system, our risk evaluation system, and then we went back to between 15 and 14% in 2019, 2020. So that the risky systems, well, there was a reduction. Were there still systems that were at risk? Yes, because some of them were where it was a short-term solution, an interim. I'm talking about high and means.
Very much. We will now move on to Ms. Ashton for 2.5 minutes.
Thank you. Well, first, just a comment. I find it pretty rich when I hear Liberals talking about how a lack of how it's not just about money and it is about capacity. I mean, where is the political will? You know, it's pretty disrespectful to blame First Nations for not having clean drinking water. You know, I have heard and visited, of course, communities where First Nations are doing everything they can with what they've got to meet the need in their communities. I mean, in the stories right now in 2021 during a pandemic are stories of that are inhumane, that are reflective of third world living conditions. And so, you know, just to set the record straight here, what we are missing is political will from this government. I do want to go to the AG to ask, you know, based on their report, how devastating is it that so many First Nations do not have access to clean drinking water? Does this also connect with their
point of order? This is really hard on my ears. I can only imagine the trouble that the translators are having. It's very loud.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Longfield.
Yeah, I love how passion is often, especially from women, is often misconstrued as being just loud.
I think it's your mouthpiece. I think it has to go up higher.
Well, I'll take my cues from the text. Thank you. So my question back to the AG is really about, you know, when communities don't have clean drinking water, is it limiting it in other ways in terms of their ability to provide other services, whether it's in terms of schools, opening up schools, you know, expanding healthcare services? We know that when there isn't enough access to quality water in communities, it has a number of other domino effects, and I'm wondering if the AG could speak to that.
So we definitely didn't look at all of those domino effects in our audit, but I do agree with you. What we did highlight is, you know, boil water advisory and what it impacts. Things such as bathing your young children requires a community to boil their water before they can do so, and preparing food. So I mean, it's just sort of fundamental things, and not having access to safe drinking water has obviously an impact on the general health of any human being. And so the ripple effect is definitely one that's there, and one that will impact generations of First Nations, and that's why it's so important to really find those long-term solutions as soon as possible.
Thank you very much, Ms. Hogan and Ms. Ashton. That brings us to the end of our questioning. I would like to thank our witnesses for joining us today. I would also like to thank you, colleagues, for all of your very good questions. And I will now invite our witnesses to take their leave.
Thank you very much. Have a good day.
You too. So colleagues, you should have all received the revised calendar for April and May. I know our clerk and our analysts worked quickly to get this into your hands so you could take a look at it. Are there any questions? Seeing none.
Yes.
Mr. Berthold?
Yeah, I'm trying to find my raise hand option. Okay. Yes, for the May 13th, we will have the meeting asked from Mr. Je vais le dire en français, dans le fond, pourquoi je parle en anglais.
I wondered why I'm speaking English. I think I'll say it in French. For the 13th of May, we're going to have a meeting with people who will be explaining the cabinet. And we'll have 2 reports. I had suggested that we would be able to go ahead with extend it to a 3-hour meeting so that we would be able to go in depth, Madam Chair. So is that okay with everybody? Would it be possible to foresee that we could have extra time already right now so that we don't arrive at the time of the meeting and then want to extend it on the spot?
Thank you very much, Mr. Berthold. I know that at times we do go overtime, and we try to keep that to a minimum given the, I think, the pressures that are on our technicians and other staff, because there are other meetings that need to I guess, begin when ours ends. I would ask the clerk to weigh in on our ability to extend a meeting by an hour on the 13th of May, and then perhaps hear from our colleagues as well as to whether or not this will work into their schedules. Thank you. Mr. Longfield. Oh, I'm sorry. Madam Clerk, would you like to go first?
No, please let Mr. Longfield go.
No, thank
Mr.
you.
Longfield?
That's where I was going as well. I could have brought my hand down because I think, yeah, we looked at an hour. If we could still have our committee meeting in 2 hours, if that's available, that would be wonderful.
Madam Chair?
So if if I'm understanding correctly, Mr. Longfield, we do have a 2-hour meeting scheduled, and Mr. Berthold is asking for an additional hour so that we would be meeting for 3 hours.
Yes, exactly. I'm agreeing with Mr. Berthold.
Okay, thank you.
If I might, Madam Chair?
Yes, please, Madam Clerk.
Okay, I have reached out to the law clerk's office, and he's available for 1 hour. He has another meeting that's in conflict with our meeting, but he can come during the first hour of the meeting. So if Mr. Berthold is looking to extend it so we have 2 hours for the draft reports, is that the case, sir? Est-ce que vous voulez l'extensionner pour les...
Did you want extra time to be able to vote to study the report?
Qu'on soit sûr.
I simply wanted to be sure that we'd have enough time to do everything. We have 2 reports and we have 1 hour of briefing. So I would propose that we start with the hour of briefing, which is very important. And then following that, we would continue possibly up to 2 hours if we need the time.
Mais qu'on prévoit.
But that we would have that extra time already in the calendar, because we don't want to have 15 extra minutes. It's better to, if we know right beforehand, it's easier to know if we know that it's going to be extended. So I'd like to ask if we could go ahead and do that right now, and I'd like my colleagues to look at that so that we would be able to go through both the reports on the 13th of May.
I have seen a thumbs up, and I'm seeing heads nodding. So if we can work it out with the technical staff to be able to extend our meeting, it looks like our committee would want to do that, Madam Clerk. Mr. Sorbera?
Thank you, Clerk, and I just want to say thank you, Chair, and thank you to the Clerk and the analysts for rejigging our schedule to make it work. And in terms of Mr. Berthold's idea, and I think Mr. Longfield chimed in as well, I'm in full support of it. This committee is very important to me on many levels. I enjoy it, first of all, but secondly, it's the Auditor General reports are very important in terms of how government works and the transparency and accountability. So if we need to go an extra hour, I've told my staff to always leave the hour before question period free in case this committee needs to run late. Or run over, so I'm all for it.
Thank you very much, Madam Clerk.
I will confirm with the services that the hour is available. This far in advance, we should be able to arrange it. And when the notice is issued, if we have the permission, I'll put it for the 3 hours.
Thank you very much. So, colleagues, with that change, do I have a motion to adopt the revised work calendar? Agreed. We are all in agreement to do that. Thank you very much. That's excellent. I just also want to let you know that the meeting on Tuesday will be on the Canada Child Benefit, Canada Revenue Agency. And with that, I would ask, is the committee in agreement to adjourn the meeting? Thumbs up? Great. Thank you very much, colleagues. Enjoy the rest of your day.